Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is Joe. This reports for April the 15th, typical tax day, though it keeps getting extended under coronavirus guidelines. However, the market, from an ES standpoint, continued to move across. Continued decline here with the green keeping the blue above. That's all bullish, as represented also by the DOC cyan below red, and continuing to rise. I mean, these are getting into some frothy area for a daily chart. That's pretty impressive. From a NASDAQ standpoint, we're already seeing a little bit of alteration here as the crossover has begun. Though still with the blue above, that's not horrible. You're just retracing to the ABM level here. However, we recognize that there was a bit of a divergence in at least the DOC from the S&P on those readings, and so that's not entirely outside of our expectations. Gold's just kind of flatlined here. Potential is, though, that with the blue able to rise above, that could create another run-up, and the euro continuing its climb solid, and that is just that representation of the U.S. Printing like there's no tomorrow. And because of that, while we're looking at after hours, we had that MBI right before the end of the day. We actually could see that it was building sooner when we had the negative 2.4 here, and then we started to get a steady build, and then once the yellow gets above that 10 level and everything else. And that's what you're seeing here on these latest colored dots, where sometimes recognizing the pivot isn't enough on these readings. We want to get a situation where we're able to understand that a line is, moving solid in one direction, and that's where some of the other both magenta and blue lines begin to do it. But what I really want to be able to have was that you're getting a continuous movement. And so I was showing yesterday on the Skype chat some of the calculations that we're doing for slope to determine that these are moving in the correct direction. So these gray represent where magenta is breaking down below yellow, and we have rollover of just the blue, and that's all it is. What is interesting about it is you're going to find that it pretty well identifies peaks from simple runs, and so when we combine those with green, those are the next layers that I'm doing onto it, and that'll give us a pretty strong indication in the middle of particular buy signals, also preventing arbitrary sell signals. So I think that's going to be helpful. You can see one developing here, the bars are closed, so it's not particularly valid. If we go back intraday, scrolling back to the beginning of it, we ended up with a few little sell signals that produced some modest moves. Again, we had these dips of every time we get into any kind of a short, we're moving into the negative red, and that's that warning sign of the buildup. And then again, of course, we get the crossovers all taking place right here. So that's going to generate the conversion into the buy configuration long before that weight MBI shows up this late in the run, and that will just add to the power of it. When the short signals finally started coming through here, this was showing that topping. The difficulty in these is when you have blue over the green, finding an accurate representation of when that run is actually over. And of course, that's going to be related to both shakeout and DOC readings added into that setup. But where the magentas come in, you can see from the little red dots too. And an interesting one you'll see too when you see these little yellow ones. That's just an indication of what the expectation for a continuation of the down move is. And when it ends is usually where we get our turnaround. You can see that's why they end exactly at where the beginning of the up runs begin here. But we went kind of sideways before breaking down a little bit later in the afternoon, and that's what led to the most significant breakdown. And I think we saw that in some of Bitcoin as well. flipping to a Bitcoin chart here, you can see we ended up with a short breakdown right around that 64,800. We had the positive extreme going right back to here, and that was looking for a low of around the 61.6 range, and it went to 61.5 on that. And still within a weak configuration, you can see here with the blue remaining below, and then you had that conversion right there of the cyan over, and then starts to break down further once the steel broke underneath. So that happened to be deal contained too with the game function, just so that you're aware of it. But that's the latest of what's going on. I think that for the first time seeing some significant downside movement, maybe we're going to start to return to a little bit more flexibility within the market range. Even on the 50K, we produced a nice decline that then turned around, which perfectly normal within its setup. So all in all, good action from a range comparative to the last couple of days. So we could see a little bit more of that activity, and I think that would be normal and a bit more healthy than some of what we've been seeing of late. As always, though, I will continue to update the Skype chat and send out any updates as I've completed them with some changes. You'll be seeing some dramatic color changes here in the next day or so, because as some of these are implemented, now that the code is pretty much written on them, it will really alter the way the chart looks, which it's just going to get tighter and tighter to where you're going to identify the smaller moves, because we're able to see exactly where they turn over instead of something like this where, yeah, it had the buy, but anywhere in between there, this could be either long or short, because again, it's just flat. So that just becomes a question of what the most predominant reading is and the best configuration, because it's just enough up and down right there that either one is going to do fine, because it's not going to produce enough points to make that big a difference, and that happens in the market at times. As always, trade well. We'll talk again later on the Skype chat. I'll be around.